Welcome to the Art of Listening to Your Body podcast. My name is Dr. Jinong and I'm your host. I'm a cathartic release therapist, professionally trained as an osteopath, psychosomatic therapist, Western acupuncturist, and herbalist. I'm fascinated by the mind-body connection and how your physical body is a manifestation of your emotional state. I help people get unstuck from their chronic pain, whether it be physical or emotional, and live the life they truly desire, grounded in values and driven by purpose. My aim is to create awareness to the underlying emotions behind pain, injury, and disease in the body, as well as behavioural dysfunctions and mental imbalances that present. I do this using a unique blend of Eastern and Western philosophies and a good dose of intuition. Join me to learn more about the story of your body, what different issues may indicate, how to release emotions so that you can prevent problems, as well as inspiring pain story interviews. Sarah is a coach for seekers and women rising, trained as a certified professional life coach, lay counsellor specialising in somatic healing, a registered yoga teacher, certified energetic healer, mindfulness guide, and an internationally published author and psycho-ed group facilitator. Sarah's coaching fuses together Western therapeutic and transformational tools with Eastern wisdom practices, as well as cutting-edge energy medicine techniques to uplift and uplevel soul-led clients in their personal breakthroughs and calling. Welcome to the podcast, Sarah. One of my wonderful clients that I worked with in a group recommended that we connect and have a chat. So I am so grateful that you said yes to this interview. And I would love to find out more about you. So can you tell me a bit about yourself and what it is you do?
Absolutely. So nice to be here. And I love watching your journey on social media and your shares there. So they really resonate. So it's a pleasure to be on here and speaking about this journey that I've been on too. And so you asked me a little bit about myself. Well, I live in the west coast of Canada on an island. We live right on the ocean and a river mouth. So a really beautiful natural space, which I've always been drawn to nature and the elements. And I found that, going back to when I was young, I found that was always a way to help myself integrate being a highly sensitive person, and a great way to kind of self-soothe and connect to greater guidance. So that is why I live where I live now. And I support people with group coaching and one-on-one coaching as well, and energy healing too. So kind of came to that journey through my own calling of, there's kind of like the shamanic journey of going through the dark nights of the soul and being brought back to inner work over and over again. I think certain people are born here to do that.
Absolutely.
And my path, there wasn't really another path. I tried to make other paths and that just didn't work. So I kind of always came back to, interpersonal relations, to inner healing, to energy medicine, to Vedic and Buddhist and mindfulness practices, because I came to them very young because I was dealing with a lot.
Can you just talk a little bit about what a highly sensitive person is?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, obviously, everybody can have a different idea of what a highly sensitive person is. But it's, it's a term that I think I came on first when I was doing lay counseling training. So Gifted Child. Do you remember who wrote that book?
No.
Okay, trying to remember who read that book. But anyway, so the highly sensitive person is one who feels a lot. And oftentimes a highly sensitive person can be, highly intelligent, very connected to their emotions and also to their sensory feelings. So highly sensitive people can often, their hearing is very sensitive. They're sensitive to light, sensitive to touch, sensitive to all these different kind of sensory perceptions, as well as feelings. And then so highly sensitive people can often be overwhelmed. And I'll speak from my own experience of being a highly sensitive person is can often deal with physical ailments due to a reaction of stress and environment. So that happened for me very young. I started to have physical symptoms in a reaction to my environment. So it was kind of an early foundational teaching for me that, our mind and body is connected.
How old were you?
Well, when I first had a kind of a crazy near-death experience when I was 5, that I think shifted my awareness. But when I remember getting, physical symptoms, I was about 8, maybe even a little bit younger.
And what sort of physical symptoms were they?
Bad stomach aches.
Mm-hmm.
So and that's what I remember them, being, just because in my mind, I remember being in the sick room at school a lot and staying home from school. And I remember going to the doctor and them doing lots of different tests. And then finally the doctor, who I recognize as, actually probably ahead of her time, said, like, it's actually just she's having stress response. And so I had that. My body was trying to give me information from a very early age.
Mm.
And yeah, at that age, I didn't know what to do with it. I think my mom was definitely into holistic things. And so I remember us getting the Louise Hay book. She had that was kind of in at the time in the 80s. And it was like using positive affirmations, that's Louise Hay's stuff, positive affirmations to heal your body and your past. Can actually be kind of toxic because it just, I believe some of that work just bypasses the pain.
I agree with you. So many people say to me, is this like Louise Hay's stuff? And I totally respect her. And I know that it works for a lot of people, but it's, the positive bypassing.
Yeah. And it was interesting because even when I was really young and my mom was like, let's do these, we'll do these affirmations every morning and then everything will be good. And you can go to school and you can handle the stress. And it was like very disorienting for me because I was like, oh, these should be making me feel better, but I don't feel better.
Mm.
So that was like an interesting kind of experience, very young, of like, this is how you should heal. And then like the authentic thing was like, that's not doing anything.
Yes.
So like, yeah. So, although, it was a nice exposure to alternative ideas, right? But yeah, it kind of created a dissonance for me of, but what I'm really feeling is this, and that doesn't want to be seen.
Yeah. Yep. Before you go any further, can you just tell us a little bit about the near-death experience when you were 5?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I like details. So what happened?
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. So we were at a lake by our house. And summer day. I was there with my mom. I can't remember if my brother was there or not, but I was with a girlfriend, and we were climbing on these little kind of, seemed like a big rock wall all the time, but I've gone back to the lake. I hike around the lake all the time now as an adult, and it's a very small little rock patch. But at that point, it seemed like a very big rock wall. So we were kind of playing on this little rock wall, and my girlfriend fell into the lake, and she couldn't swim. She hadn't taken lessons. She didn't know how to swim. So she was basically drowning. Like, she couldn't keep herself afloat. So she was starting to sink down and really panicking. So I could swim. I had swimming lessons. I felt very comfortable in the water. So I jumped in to try to help her out. And because she was panicking so much, she just held me under. So I couldn't get up into the air. I was just held under the water by her so that she could breathe. And it was, since then, I always say drowning is a very peaceful way to go. There was, a small bit of panic, but you kind of lose the oxygen that you need quite quickly. So there was struggle, like I was trying to get out. And then all of a sudden, just, I guess I didn't have enough oxygen finally, and everything got very, very peaceful. Like, just the struggle released completely. And it just started to leave my body. So literally had the experience of like floating up and out, and then above the scene. So I was like looking at what was happening, and I could see my friend holding me under the water. And it was just like going towards a light, and it was just very sweet and not scary and peaceful and euphoric. Like, I later had a surgery when I was a lot older, and I don't remember what painkiller they gave me, but it was very much like this experience of just bliss. And then someone did jump in and saved us. So I did. I was fine. I came back into my body, and then woke up on the shore and, recovered. But yeah, it was kind of an interesting experience of going out of the body and having a little bit of kind of distance from this life.
Interesting. Mm-hmm. Did you talk to anyone about it at a young age?
At that age, I don't remember.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I know I've talked to people since. I know that my mom knows about it because she gave me this near-death experience book. And when I was having physical symptoms when I was older, fibromyalgia, she found this book that a doctor had linked, can't remember the author right now, a doctor had linked near-death experiences with Kundalini awakening and symptoms of fibromyalgia. So anyway.
Okay, so this is a good reading. But before you go down that pathway of, what happened with the stomach aches and the fibromyalgia,
mm-hmm.
You talked a little bit about Vedic, but this might be slightly different. But are you familiar with the Ayurvedic Dosas?
Yes.
Cool.
Yeah.
Because the highly sensitive person for me is the Vata, which no one's going to be able to see you on the screen, but you look very much like a Vata person. And just talking about being sensitive to noise when there's that excess, but I see them as very spiritually connected people, and sometimes all those messages that can come in can get really overwhelming, but also just the overwhelm from being in a crowd of people, the noise, the light, just sensory overload. And also I noticed that they're usually the ones that have the reactions or the responses to medication. Like you said, that you were given a painkiller and then you just like, again, had that state of bliss or that out-of-body experience. So cool. All right.
Yeah.
Let's move on to what happened after you were 8 and the stomach pains.
And it can be hard for Vata people to stay in their bodies.
Yeah.
which
Yeah,
is
they
like,
need a lot of grounding, don't they?
yeah, yeah, yeah. So sorry, then you said what happened when I was 8? Is that what you said?
After 8, there was a bit
Okay.
more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So then, after 8, going into it's about 11 or 12 that I started to develop an eating disorder.
What sort of eating disorder?
Anorexia, which then turned into bulimia. But it started out as kind of controlling my eating and exercising, compulsive exercising. And, when I have had a lot of, distance from it and looking back, and I can see that it was trying to deal with overwhelming feelings and a lot of dark feelings.
What sort of dark feelings as a 8-year-old, 11-year-old, 12-year-old, if you can remember?
Well, it's interesting to kind of try to label them, because it's almost just like it felt like darkness. Like it didn't. And that's what felt so confusing for me, was like, this darkness is kind of coming for me, or like there, and it's overwhelming me and I don't know what to do with it. I need to numb it out. I need to control my experience. And I didn't really have a vocabulary for, I would say, fear. It's probably mostly fear, and grief and sadness. Yeah, and probably discomfort, being uncomfortable. I'd say that yeah, those are some of the overwhelming feelings. Yeah.
I'm just thinking a little bit about your parents, and how was it that they handled you as an 11, 12-year-old with an eating disorder, having all of these dark feelings?
Well, they didn't know. So my eating disorder went undiagnosed until I told them at, I think I was 17 when I shared it with them. Like there were symptoms, like I wasn't getting my period and other things. But things were busy at home and parents were stressed. And my parents, I was being raised by my mother. My parents divorced when I was 5. So my mom was really, really busy, really engaged. I was always very high achiever, and nothing was really questioned. It was just, Sarah loves to exercise. She takes care of herself. She likes to do her own meals. That's fine. I think it was like, okay, good. Well, I don't have to do it. Yeah. So, and I didn't go to my parents for support around that. I didn't even know how to talk about it. I didn't have a language for it. I just knew that I had to deal with these feelings somehow, and felt like it wasn't okay to burden anybody with them. That there was already enough stress and challenge happening, and no one would have the time or space to help me with this. So then I just kind of went to my own resources for trying to work with it. And, I did start seeing a counselor in high school. I went to the local counselor at the school, and but never talked to them about an eating disorder. It's very interesting. I can look back. There was never, and that was never even suggested. I don't know why. I think it was because I was such a high achiever. I'm not really sure what was going on. But there was never a link made with that. But I did seek some supports, but kept that part of my life very private, and then it just became more and more private. But then when it got out of hand, like when it developed into kind of full-blown bulimia, that's when it became really hard for me to kind of hide it, and the shame around it increased. Mm-hmm. It was easier when I was dealing with just anorexia and over-exercising, to just say, well, I like to exercise, oh, I'm too busy, I don't need to eat, or I'm doing my food on my own. But bulimia is harder to hide. There's large amounts of food that go missing. There's a lot of time involved with that. So that's when I kind of brought it up to my family, like, okay, this is what's happening for me, and I want to work with it.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So you talked a bit about fibromyalgia as well. When did that come up for you?
That came up for me at the end of my 20s. Yeah.
So is there a bit of a gap that we need to fill from 17 when you told your parents to the fibromyalgia?
Yeah. Well, like with the eating disorder, that was something that I worked on for years after that. I would say it took until about 27 to fully feel like I was eating like normally, or it wasn't a fixation anymore.
And did you do that with a lot of external assistance?
Well, kind of interesting. Like I definitely tried getting external support. There was a eating disorder center in my town, and I went to that, and but I actually found that made it worse.
In what way?
There was groups and things that they would get people involved in, and being with other people who had an eating disorder for me was it was almost like now I had all these new ideas of how to keep going with my eating disorder and sneakier ways to do it, because we would all kind of share in a group and things like that. So it was more, that didn't really help to shift the pattern for me. And going to traditional, like I had a counselor and a psychologist, and doing that route with those people anyways didn't really help either. But what began to work for me was meditation.
Mm-hmm.
So I began studying Buddhism and doing meditation in my teens, and working with that more and more. That was the thing that kind of broke the cycle with the eating disorder for me, because I learned that I could stay with my feelings.
Yeah. And observe them.
Yeah. And just be a witness. And okay, like I can sit, through the practice of just practicing sitting every day for a certain amount of time. Oh, I can stay when these big feelings come up and nothing happens.
Yeah.
So that was probably the biggest aha for me with my eating disorder.
Mm-hmm. Would you say it's to not react to those feelings by exercising, by prepping a meal, and just feeling the sensations in your body?
Yes. Learning to, I guess, to make friends with them, make friends with the feelings. Mm-hmm. Instead of using aversion, like making a meal or going and exercising or trying to get away from the experience. How do I make friends with it, and then kind of learned to do kind of more somatic approaches of, okay, like how do I actually like hold the container for these feelings and get curious about them? What exactly do they look like? What do they feel like? What's the sensation in my body? Does it grow? Does it, shrink? And through that, realizing like, oh, they pass. So there's this experience. If I can witness it and be with it and not judge it, I think working with non-judgment of like bad or good feelings really helped too, to just let them move through and not react to them. Yeah.
So take us into the fibromyalgia journey.
Yeah. So that was kind of interesting. When I was thinking about talking with you, it was like, okay. I was kind of just thinking more about the whole journey and just realizing that a lot of it, is just realizing that things are kind of sensations and experiences rather than something to be avoided. So I really got that lesson with fibromyalgia, which, looked like chronic pain, like all the time, 24 hours, while I was sleeping, who knows if it was happening while I was sleeping, but, when I would wake up from sleeping, it would wake me up from sleeping, kind of thing. And an exhaustion, and then just really not being able to run away from that was a deeper, deepening.
What do you think the trigger was for the fibromyalgia?
It's hard to say. There could have been many things. I had gotten an infection, a stomach infection, which the naturopath that I went to at the beginning of my journey with that said that was most likely what triggered it. I do have indicators for Lyme's disease, so that could have triggered it. I have, some trauma that from earlier childhood that I don't totally talk about, but, that could have triggered it. So there's all these.
It's always multifaceted, isn't it? There's like so many things, and it's often accumulation of a number of different elements.
Yes. Yeah. So hard to pinpoint that.
And then moving through that, do you still experience chronic pain?
I still have strong sensations at times. There is a lot of the time where I don't have any symptoms of pain, which is amazing, because for a few years I thought that I would never be in that experience again. So it was very, very dark for a while, and I couldn't see my way out. Very much with the eating disorder. The eating disorder was very, very intense. I remember at a time, a lot of times when I had the eating disorder, thinking I'm never going to be able to live without this. This is my whole universe, And then similarly to the fibromyalgia, when the pain was, so bad and the exhaustion, I was bedridden for, almost 2 years. And, still able to do some things in the latter year, but it was very consuming.
So during this time in your 20s, what sort of work were you doing? Because you mentioned how you tried other pathways, but they didn't work for you. And now I'm assuming you're on the pathway that you really enjoy and that feels really aligned. So what were you doing in your 20s versus what you're doing now?
I was working in hospitality in my 20s, for half of my 20s. Anyways, and kind of what I meant as far as that is kind of the desire to go more into academic areas, and which was kind of interesting because when I developed fibromyalgia, like I was doing a lot of things, which could have been another precursor to it. I was burnt out. I was over stressed. I was back in school, so I wanted to finish my social work degree and get my master's in that. I was finishing up the lay counseling training that I was doing and seeing one-on-one clients. And I guess what I meant with how I was directed was I really wanted to go that route. I wanted to go the academic route. I wanted to keep climbing. I wanted to, probably teach that. I wanted to have a really safe and secure way of being in the world that felt very normal, I guess I would say. But when the fibromyalgia hit, it took over and I had to quit everything. And so basically learning how to work with my body and my own kind of journey became the thing that I had to do also for work. Like I couldn't separate the two, which is kind of, interesting because so many of the spiritual paths I was on, like studying yoga and Buddhism, it's all about that. It's like you need to live your work. So that's kind of what I mean, where I felt like I was directed back. Yeah.
So tell us a little bit more about not necessarily your childhood, but you mentioned to me earlier how a lot of stuff that plays out for us does stem in childhood.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, we, develop who we are, or our belief system, our inner belief system, and our nervous system young, in the first years of our lives. So that becomes the foundation of kind of how we respond to the world and how we respond to each other and how we respond to ourselves, in my opinion. And so for me, working with inner child healing, working on creating an inner environment of love and compassion has been the thing that helped me change my life and helped me get out of an eating disorder and chronic pain, which I see with lots of clients too. So using force to change something doesn't work very well for a lot of people. I've tried to force myself and control myself out of an eating disorder for like 7 years, and that didn't do anything. And then when I started to develop acceptance and love and build compassion and mindfulness, that was kind of what started to allow me to shift my experience. Same with fibromyalgia, developing acceptance, not fighting the pain, getting to work with the pain and treat it like a friend again, just like with the emotions, how can we befriend these things? So I think, for most of us as children, we didn't learn to befriend those parts of ourselves. We didn't learn to befriend our feelings. Oftentimes there wasn't space or room for us to talk about our experience. It was just, I feel like it was a different paradigm back, 20, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, where parents also weren't informed about how to hold space for highly sensitive children. That is a thing, that oh, tough love actually doesn't work that well for children's development. So I think a lot of us receive that kind of tough love experience being raised. And so then we treated ourselves that way. And then we treat ourselves that way, and then we're using that kind of it becomes like this self-harm, this inner self-harm. So working with our childhoods, we can really start to understand why we talk to ourselves the way we talk to ourselves, why we have beliefs about certain things that seem really strong. You know, when I was starting to show up kind of more on social media, and I did that, I kind of eased into that through writing. I started to write a lot of health and wellness articles online, and just even noticing, oh my gosh, like this kind of trauma response to exposure. So for me, looking at that and looking at what is the belief that was formed, you know, when I was really young around, like, I shouldn't show up and take up space. So when I go back, you know, to my childhood, I can see why I developed that belief. You know, I didn't want to stress anybody out. There was a lot of chaos happening. There was a challenge. I wanted to just take care of myself, be quiet, and, you know, not disturb anybody. So actually, as an adult, trying to show up in the world as a powerful woman was very, very triggering at first. I had all this kind of self-doubt, sabotage, all this, you know, this inner kind of critic shouting, like, you shouldn't do that. You're such a bad girl. Like these, you know, like who are you to do that? You know, don't take up space, right? So all these kind of inner voices trying to keep me back to the belief system that I formed when I was young. I don't know if that answers your question.
It does. Yeah, absolutely. So how did you work through it? How did you reparent your inner child?
Well, a long journey. I think it was something that I began years and years and years ago, and I started to take my inner child on dates. So I would just take her to the closet and ask her what does she want to wear, and then I'd put that on. So start honoring these inner, younger, natural impulses that were more kind of spontaneous and loving, and to try to build that kind of compassionate relationship with her. Then I would take her to the beach, or I would write with her. I did a lot of journaling and dialoguing with my inner child to begin with. And my inner child, to begin with, hated me. Like, she did not want anything to do with me. She was so distraught and hurt. So it took a long time for me to work with her and kind of bring her out of the shadow and bring her more kind of into the light, get her comfortable being with me, and trust, I guess, building that inner trust kind of with her, which is really important for like seeing, because I do believe that our inner child, our unconscious inner child, can kind of start to control our world in some ways through kind of sabotage, or I don't like the word sabotage, but through the desire to keep herself safe.
Yeah. So what kept you going? Because I think we're very conditioned that we do this thing and it works, but you said that your inner child really kind of pushed you away, didn't like the conversations, the dates that you were having with her, whatever that may be. What kept you going to keep trying?
That was a good question.
Was it just a feeling, just a knowing?
Yeah, I think there was just a knowing that there wasn't another way, that like this was the way.
You tried other things.
Yeah, like trying a lot of traditional support, even around, like even with the fibromyalgia, I went to, a clinic, and that was said to be, the best clinic in our province and the best specialists. And they were wonderful people, but their treatments were just dealing with symptoms. There was no looking at root cause. There was no trying to heal what might be keeping this going or increasing the intensity. Or so knowing that I needed to get to deeper layers, I think was the, and I guess that was another reason why I said, like, I tried to go other routes. Like, I tried to take pain medication at first. I'm very resistant to taking medication because I have strong responses to it. But at first I did, when I needed a break from the pain, I tried pain medication. It made me really depressed. And there was other symptoms and things too. So I felt like I didn't really have another choice but to try different ways of working with myself and my body. And really that led me to doing energy work and energy healing with my own self too, and really exploring through like the emotional freedom technique, through doing, Reiki trainings, and then just doing that on myself every single day. So through kind of dedicated practices, I was able to shift out of the chronic pain. It wasn't just like magic in any way. It was very dedicated, multiple times a day practice that led to that for me.
So can you share a little bit more about your work, what it looks like now? Who is it that you help?
Absolutely. Yeah. So mostly I work with women for the most part. I do have space for male clients as well, but as my practice has evolved more and more, I find I'm specializing more with women who are working on kind of breaking through and rising. So whether that is through their own kind of chronic conditions of pain or challenge, working on ways to build our foundations so that we have the strength to move forward in the directions that we desire. So through coaching, through my coaching is very integrated. It's very much an Eastern and Western integration of bringing in kind of yogic and Vedic wisdom and meditations, as well as mindfulness tools like stress-based mindfulness reduction, and bringing in kind of traditional therapeutic like cognitive behavioral therapy, and then working with a lot with the nervous system. So something that I ended up working with a lot myself, first through my training in yoga, which I didn't really get at the time when I started training in yoga. I didn't understand the connection to the nervous system and regulation so much. But then as my own body went through the trauma of dealing with a chronic illness and chronic pain, healing that, I was like, oh, interesting. The nervous system plays such a big part in it. And so really working with people around how to regulate and nourish our nervous system so that we don't go into overwhelm, so that we can deal with stress, so that we can rest, digest, and heal. So doing that kind of integrated approach, I find helps people work with their lives in a more holistic way. So it's not just mind, it's not just body, it's not just goals. It's actually, here are practical tools that you can use every day.
And do you find that when the people you work with dive into the coaching space with you, that there is resistance that shows up?
Really depends on the person.
Mm.
That's what I find. Like, and some people, it takes the resistance a little while to show up. And some people, the resistance never shows up.
Yeah.
I have this wonderful somatic tracking practice that I teach clients of how to work with their resistance. So when things like that show up, we can work with them, and working with it through getting to know what resistance feels like, what the sensation is in the body, what shape it is, what information it has to tell us, can help to kind of move through that resistance. And there's many reasons why people have resistance, right? It's not the same. Resistance isn't the same for everyone, right? There's many reasons and possibly traumas why somebody is having resistance to an experience of working with another person.
Yeah. And why is it that you love working with people in this way?
The reason I love working with people in this way is because I've seen the changes it creates in lives. I've had so many people tell me, like, wow, I've never worked in this way before. This is giving me the tools to come back into my body, to feel empowered, and to be able to take the steps that I want to create change. And so for me, that's the reason to continue kind of holding these containers and teaching these tools. And as our world gets, our world is kind of challenging right now. It has been, and it's gotten a little bit more so in the last few years. So we need to work from within. My big belief. We need to learn the tools to work with ourselves, because this person right here is the person that needs to be able to go into all the different situations and experiences of our lives and get through. And, as adults, there's a lot of situations that we need to work with. And some are wonderful and beautiful experiences, and other ones may be challenging and overwhelming. So preparing ourselves with kind of these skills to get through life and go through the big ups and downs, I think is really, really crucial, so that we don't all go crazy.
Absolutely, yeah. If we're waiting for the world to change around us or that person to change, then you're just creating more challenges for yourself. Yeah. It's hard, but it's easier to work on yourself.
Yeah, we can't control, we can't always control what's going on around us. It would be nice if we could, or it's nice to think of, once I get over this stress, there'll be no more stresses, right? But that's such a trap to get into, because there's always something that comes along, right? So we actually need to work with our ability and our resilience to deal with stress in the moment, and maybe make it not such a bad experience. Maybe make it be just an experience that you're working with.
Yeah, absolutely. So what would be something that you would like to share with other highly sensitive people who perhaps resonate with your story but don't know where to start?
Yeah, I would say, one of the biggest places to begin is with more self-love. So how can you reframe our perspective? How can we reframe our perspective of sensitivity to being a gift instead of a challenge? So how can we find the jewels in that sensitivity? Like, perhaps it makes one a better artist. Perhaps it makes one, a better lover. Perhaps it makes one more passionate in this area. Or the sensitivities is a beautiful thing, because it allows us to feel a lot. So how can you, or how can we begin to, first of all, love that experience, accept it, that we're highly sensitive, claim it, maybe start telling people about it. Oh yeah, I'm highly sensitive. Use it, take the stigma out of being one who experiences a lot and who gets easily overwhelmed too. And then start to realize that also often the overwhelm is just in the nervous system. It's just in our perception of our feelings and strong emotions. So it's all workable. It's very, very workable. And start reading about it. If that feels like the easiest avenue for someone right now, start reading books about highly sensitive people. Start reading books about trauma healing. Dr. Peter Levine is really great. And start working with your nervous system. Meditation is not something that's easy for everyone to do. So I don't always just say, just meditate, begin meditating and become a good witness, to your feelings. Because sometimes that is not the gateway for people. Sometimes there's too much anxiety to begin with that. So, the gateway of yoga can be a beautiful experience, or working with breath work can be good, or seeking out somatic based approaches. So using the body kind of as a way to get to know our experience can be helpful, so that we can drop out of the mind. Because oftentimes too, with people who are highly sensitive, the mind is really busy. So if we can slow that down in any way, if we can drop into the body, into somatic approach, we can drop into grounding in our feet, noticing our hands, that can really help to kind of pause the immediate reaction to our experience and just start to befriend a little bit. Maybe even to work with the question, how could I befriend my experience of being highly sensitive a little more today?
Beautiful. How can people find you, Sarah, if they want to learn more about your work?
Yeah, they can find me through my website, so www.sarahnorrad.com. And then my Instagram is sarah.norrad. Facebook also, Sarah Norrad on there too. So those are the multiple ways to get in contact with me. I also have the Inner Circle newsletter that you can sign up for free through my website. And I do a lot of writing and sharing of these tools. So you can also go to my blog on my website to find different somatic, Vedic, mindfulness, therapeutic tools.
Anything shared on this episode is for information only. It does not replace professional advice from a healthcare practitioner. If you are experiencing pain, injury, or illness, seek advice that is catered to your individual needs. Thanks for learning with me on the Art of Listening to Your Body podcast. If you like what you've heard, I would love if you could rate, review, and share with your friends. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram. My handle is The Art of Listening to Your Body. If you're interested in working with me, I offer online courses for the general public and trainings for practitioners, therapists, and coaches. I also open limited one-to-one coaching spaces throughout the year. If you would like to find out more, head to my website, drjinong.com.